friends, good afternoon. Myself Pushpender Singh, and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So, as you know, today you have 26th of June 2021, and these lectures are basically useful for those students who are preparing for the civil services examination, which is conducted by the UPSC, as well as other government competitive examinations. And we are referring basically the two national newspapers like the Hindu and Indian Express. Okay, you can also read and subscribe basically these two national newspapers. Apart from that, you can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures, right? So these lectures are uploaded on the YouTube on the day-to-day basis, so you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures. All right, so let's begin with the today's lecture. So first news is all about, right, the draft code on the Social Security Employees Compensation Center Rules 2021. So here the Ministry of Labor and the Employment have notified these draft rules, right, which is related to the employees compensation under the code of the Social Security, which was enacted by the Parliament in 2020, right, for the suggestions. So here the suggestions are invited for the draft rules which is related to the compensation of the employees under the code of the Social Security by the Ministry of Labor and Employment. So what is happening is that this notification or this draft rules which have been recently been notified, right, under the code of Social Security. So here is that the proposed draft rules basically supersede, right, the three important rules which were previously enacted by the Parliament or by the Government of India. These were related to, the first is basically the employees compensation rule. These were enacted in 1924, as well as the second is basically the employees compensation, the transfer of money, that is inter-country jurisdiction rules 1935, as well as the employees compensation, right, that is the venue of proceedings, rules 1996. So these three rules that were previously been given or been notified by the Government of India under the current, Employees Compensation Act. These Employees Compensation Act, okay, that is the Umbrella Act, okay. This was passed, right, in 1923. Now recently the Parliament has enacted, right, the Code of the Social Security 2020 that we are talking, that has basically repealed, right, the section, that has repealed this act or the old act. So this old act, which is known as the Employees Compensation Act 1923, was repealed by the section 164 of the code, which is known as the Code of the Social Security 2020, which was passed by the Parliament of India in September 2020. So under this code, right, recently the rules have been notified by the Government of India, right, and these rules are basically considered as a draft rule. So definitely the code of the Social Security basically consolidate the laws relating to the Social Security which have been extended to the workers as well as to the employees in organized as well as in the unorganized sector. So it's a very, very important step which was taken by the Ministry of the Labor and the Employment. So here the chapter 7 of the Social Security Code, which is related to the employees compensation, is all related to, right, the compensation which will be provided, right, by the employer. So here the employer's liability will be there with respect to, right, the compensation which will be provided to the employees if there is a fatal accident or if there is a serious bodily injury or any sort of an occupational disease while during the working conditions in that respect. So it's a very, very important rule. And some of the draft compensation, rules which are notified by the Government of India is that. So first of all, the central government, provides, some sort of the manner which the claim or the settlement can be claimed by the employees to the employer. So it's very, very important. The second is the rate of the interest for the delayed payment. Let's say for employer, if the payment is not delayed or if the payment is not paid to the employees, definitely the employer has to pay the higher rate of interest for the delayed payment. So in that respect, as per the new rules, right, if the amount of the compensation which will payable under this the draft guidelines is not paid by the employer within the period of 30 days. So there is a period of the 30 days window within which the employer has to pay, right, the compensation to the employees, right. The employer shall have to pay, right, the date, if the employer is paying that type of compensation after 30 days, so it's a simple interest at the rate of 12% per annum. So that means the employer will be liable to pay, right, a delayed amount, that is at the rate of 12% per annum to the employees for the delayed payment, as per the notified by the government of India from time to time. Okay, and here the most important aspect is that the venue of the proceedings, the transfer of the matters related to related to the transmitting of the money from one competent authority to another authority have been streamlined with. For example, the arrangement have been made for the inter-country sending of this money. That is basically, you call them basically some sort of an amount that has been received. Okay, so here that some sort of a transfer of the money which is being paid as a compensation. So it has also notified the rules which give effect to the arrangement, right, with other countries also for the transfer of this money, right, which have been paid under this code. So here any sum of the money which have been transmitted to any other authority in that respect, or any other authority in accordance with the rule, okay, the cost of such compensation would be deducted from the sum which has to be transferred or which has to be ultimately sent. Okay, and such money will be transferred by the remittance transfer which have been received by, or some sort of a money order in that respect. Okay, so that's all for the for these some of the few guidelines that we have discussed. Next you have the information related to the Food and Agriculture Organization. So recently the Union Minister of Agriculture and the Farmers Welfare recently have addressed the virtual session of, or the 42nd virtual session of the Food and Agriculture Organization, right, of the United Nations. Okay, in that virtual session, the Union Minister of the Agriculture and the Farmers Welfare, the Sri Narendra Singh Tomar, has basically addressed the challenges which the world is facing today, specifically with respect to the COVID-19 complications, right? So the agriculture and the farmers are also facing that type of challenges across the world. So it's very, very important about the challenges that we are facing. So here, let us understand about the Food and Agriculture Organization. So the FAO is basically a specialized agency of the United Nations, right? So definitely its main motto is to defeat the hunger and improve the nutrition and the food security throughout the world, right? It's have the motto which has been written in the Latin word, that is the Fiat Spanius, that is being translated, let there be a bread. That means let there be a bread or the food, right, to at least every single person around the world, so that we could defeat the hunger and improve nutrition and the food security around the world in that respect. Okay, and as I told you that it was founded in 1945 and recently it has been completed its 75 years of its service to the world, right, on the 16th of October 2020. It has been recently been headquartered, it has been headquartered in Rome, in Italy. It is basically having the membership of around 197 members. Okay, and this FAO is basically governed by the biennial conference. The biennial conference means once in every 2 years. Once in every 2 years. That means you will have this biennial conference, right, which will basically attended by the member countries as well as the European Union, right? So it will basically help in the election of the 49 member executive council. Okay, so this is what is the governing mechanism of the FAO, which has to be understood in that respect. Okay, next. So next is PINAKA rocket. Okay, recently the Defense Research and Development Organization have successfully test fired, right, the extended version of indigenously developed by the DRDO, a multi-barrel rocket launcher, right, at the integrated test range Chandipur of the coast of Orissa. So this was a very successful attempt that was done by the DRDO for testing this multi-barrel rocket launcher specifically for the PINAKA rocket. So it's basically an enhanced range version of the PINAKA rocket system that can destroy the target up to 45 kilometers. So now let us understand about this PINAKA rocket system in brief. This PINAKA is basically a multi-barrel rocket launcher, right? Multi-barrel rocket launcher means at a single stroke you can launch the multiple rockets, right, within a fraction of the seconds only, and it has been used by the Indian Army for the defense purpose. So it has been developed by the Defense Research and Development Organization. Okay, and the PINAKA basically integrates some of the state-of-art technologies for delivering the superior combat performance with the Indian Army. So definitely the development of this PINAKA multi-barrel rocket system was basically commenced in 1987, way back. Okay, it was commenced at the Pune base, the DRDO facility, okay, which is also known as the Armament Research and Development Establishment, which is located in Pune, okay. And the DRDO, or Defense Research Development Organization, is basically responsible for the overall design of this system. So definitely it has been developed by this Pune based Armament Research and Development Establishment, okay, that was responsible for this design and development of this one. Apart from that, we will also have the association with the High Energy Material Research and the Laboratory, which will have the manufacturing support of also the Economic Explosive Limited, which is located at Nagpur. So as I told you that it's a multi-barrel rocket system. That means it can fire up to 12 rockets in 44 seconds. So consecutively 12 rockets can be fired in 40 seconds. You could understand that how lethal it could be, okay. And it is basically mounted on the Tatra truck, which is equipped with the state of guidance, the sensors, as well as the advanced navigation and the control system with that respect. And the navigation system, with that, the missiles are basically aided by the Indian Regional Navigation System, or Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, which is basically having a constellation of many satellites with that Indian, the time origin. Okay, so here you could see the Tatra truck, which have been mounted with this, multi-barrel rocket system, or the PINAKA multi-barrel rocket system, which have been, firing the salvo of around 12 rockets in 44 seconds. You could understand that, right, in that respect. Okay. Next, you have the International Labour Organization. So recently, right, the Indian Secretary, or the Secretary Labour and the Employment, have recently, right, completed the tenure of the chair of the governing body of International Labour Organization. So the Apurva Chandra have recently completed the governing chair of the basic governing body of ILO, right. She has been holding this position, right, from the October 2020 to June 2021, okay. And India has assumed this chair of the governing body of ILO after the gap of 35 years. So now let us understand about this International Labour Organization. So International Labour Organization is basically again the United Nations agency, right. It is basically related to the labor, or related to the world, right, to the world. Its important mandate is to basically advance the socio-economic justice throughout the world, right, by setting up of the international labor standards around the world, right. So what we are talking about, this governing body, right. So India has been, holding this tenure as the chair of this governing body. So what is that governing body? So governing body is also called the executive body of the ILO, right. So here it meets basically at least 3 times a year, right. So it meets, at least 3 times a year, okay. That is in the month of March, in the month of June, as well as in the month of November. So what is the main function of this governing body? So it takes, the decisions on the international labor organizations, the policies issue. It also decides the agenda of the international labor conferences, right. It also adopted, the draft programs and the budget of the organization, right. Definitely for the submission to the conference, as well as it will also help in the election of the director general, right, which is basically associated with the International Labor Organization in that respect. The most important motto of the ILO is, right, through decent work for all. That means a decent working conditions to all laborers across the world. It has been headquartered in the Geneva in the Switzerland, and the parent organization of this International Labor Organization is Economic and the Social Council of the United Nations. So here the Economic and the Social Council of the United Nations are basically under the overall authority of the General Assembly, right, and it basically coordinates the economic and the social work of the United Nations. So whatever you have the economic and the social work which is associated with the United Nations, it basically done by this Economic and the Social Council of the United Nations. So as a central forum for this economic and the social work, right, it basically discuss the international economic and the social issues, as well as we will also try to formulate the policy recommendations to the states, right. And council plays a very, very crucial role to fostering the international cooperation, specifically, for the development across the world. So it's a member of the United Nations Development Group also, and it is also, meeting the sustainable development goals across the world. If you could see the history of the International Labour Organization, it has been created in 1919. So it is one of the oldest, the organ of the United Nations family. It has been formed as a part of the Treaty of Versailles, right, which basically ended the World War First. The World War First was started in 1914, and ultimately it was culminated in 1980. And ultimately the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed, right, which has basically culminated or ended the World War One. So it reflected, right, the universal, the truth for the setting up of this universal and the lasting peace, right, for the social justice. So what is this Treaty of Versailles? See, Treaty of Versailles is nothing but a peace document, right, which have been signed at the end of World War One, okay, by the Allied powers as well as the associated powers, okay, as well as with the Germany, right. It was signed at the Palace of the Versailles in France. So that is what it is known as the Treaty of Versailles, because it is signed in the Palace of Versailles, which is located in France on the June 28th. So that is on the June 28th, 1919. This treaty was signed, right? It took force on the January 10, 1920. In that respect, the major Allied powers, right, which were associated with the Treaty of Versailles were basically Great Britain, right, which was France, as well as the Russian Empire, right, which was basically formally linked by the Treaty of London that was signed on the September 5, 1914, as well as it were also associated with, the other countries also, like you have the Portugal, the Japan, right, Italy, right, as well as you have the Germany with that respect, okay. And in 1946, the ILO became the specialized agency of the United Nations, which was subsequently, framed after the League of the Nations, right, which was not successful. And subsequently, you have the United Nations. Currently, ILO has 187 member states, right, out of 193 UN member states that were basically took the part of this structure, okay. And it's only the tripartite UN agency which brings together the government, employers, and the workers, right, across 187 member states in the EILO, okay. Next, you have INS VIKRANT. So INS VIKRANT is basically nothing but, right, so here it's basically the first indigenous aircraft carrier, right, which have been built by the Cochin Shipyard Limited at the Kochi in Kerala. So recently the Defense Minister Sri Rajnath Singh have visited, right, and reviewed the progress of the construction work of INS VIKRANT, which is the India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, right, and which is supposed to be commissioned, or which is supposed to be commissioned in the first half of 2020. So recently it has the Rajnath Singh have visited and look after the progress of the construction of the INS VIKRANT, and have hopefully assumed that the INS VIKRANT will be ready and will be commissioned with the Indian Navy in the first half of 2020, right, and it will be the most potent sea-based asset, right, with the Indian Navy. So definitely the INS VIKRANT is the first indigenous aircraft carrier. That means it can carry the aircraft. So for that matter, it can carry the MiG-29K fighter aircraft on the basically on the basically aircraft carrier. It can also carry the Kamo 31 air early warning helicopters. It will also carry, right, the MH-60R multi-role helicopters, as well as it will also carrying the advanced light helicopters, which was indigenously built, okay. The motto of this ship is very important, is basically the Jayame Sam Yuddhi Sparda. That is the Sanskrit motto which has been written, or which have been taken from the Rig Veda, okay, clause 1.8.3, which is means I defeat those who fight against me. So very important motto is that, right, I will defeat those those countries or those my enemies, those who fight against me. So it is for the peaceful purpose, but definitely at the time of the attack, definitely I will defeat for those my enemies, okay. So it's an aircraft carrier. So it is the biggest ship, right, which will be made in India, right, which is having the total investment of around 20,000 crore. You can understand the total investment of around 20,000 crore, and it will have around the length of 263 meters, okay, and it will have the breadth of around 63 meters. So you can understand it is 263 cross 63 is the dimension of this aircraft carrier. And here you could see the pavilion, or the the runway where the aircraft can basically take off, and it will have the vessel have around 15 decks, okay, and it can displace around 40,000 tons of water. That is the displacement capacity of this of this aircraft carrier, and it can have the speed of around 30 knots, which is basically the nautical miles. If we just convert into the kilometers per hour, it will be equated to the kilometers per hour. So that means the top speed, or it can touch the speed of around 55 kilometers per hour in the oceans. So recently what happens is it has completed is the basing trials. So before inducted into the Indian Navy, it has been gone through, or it has already undergone through the basing trials, which have been successfully done in November 2020. After that, right, it will be prepared for the sea trials. Currently it has been undergoing the sea trials, and after completing the sea trials, it will be inducted, right, into the Indian Navy in the first half of 2022. So this project of of this indigenous aircraft carrier, which was started in the previous Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, which basically governed the country in 2002, right? So this cabinet or this government of India in 2002 under the Atal Bihari Vajpayee have sanctioned this project. Okay, the first phase for the contract was signed in 2007, and ultimately the second phase of the contract was signed in 2017, and it was the third phase of the contract was signed in 2019, and it was completed at the Cochin Shipyard Limited. Now it's undergoing the sea trials for that, ultimately the induction purpose for the Indian Navy. Okay, next you have the parent participation in the home-based learning. So here the most important innovative step by the Department of the School Education and the Literacy, right? Ministry of Education have released the guidelines for the parents, right, or for the caretakers, or for the grandparents, or for whatever, right, guardians, right, so that these parents can also participate in the home-based learning of the students or the children's, right, as during the COVID-19, because of the school closure, and the students can also benefit out of it. So here the ministry or the Department of School Education or the Ministry of Education expected the role of the parents or the guardians in the home-based learning of the children's which are not able to go to the schools because of the COVID-19 lockdown. So here the Education Minister recently highlighted that the home is basically the first school of any student. Okay, and the parents are considered as a first teacher. Okay, so for that matter, the parents and the home are basically having the essential the participation in the development of the children. So here the guidelines emphasized on the role of art. So this guidelines, which was initiated by the Ministry of Education, is basically emphasized of the role of art, which is as a therapy for for the children which are under stress or the trauma because of this COVID-19 lockdown. Okay, so these guidelines basically consider the parents' role, which is the most vital to the children's growth. Okay, specifically the learning in this new normal, right, which is related to the COVID-19, right? The parents' participation in the home-based learning during the school closure is the most important aspect. So here the center's guidelines, on the home-based learning emphasize on the need of the parents to create the safe and the engaging environment for the children, right? As well as to create a positive environment for the learning for the children, right? So here, the guidelines basically also advises the schools to involve the parents by providing some sort of information or the ideas, so that they could also have the students at the home, right, with the homework or with other curriculum related activities, also with respect to the decisions and the planning, so that the students can also learn, right, various analytic and participative activities in that respect. Okay, so these guidelines basically aims to provide information, right, why, what, and how to participate, right, specifically in this engagement process, right, during the school closures, right, so that irrespective of the literacy level, these parents, guardians can also be contribute to the development of the children. Okay, so it is guidelines are not they are meant not only for the parents but also for every person who is considered as a caregivers, caretakers, grandparents, community members, older siblings, right, who can engage with the children, right, so that they could work for the promotion of the welfare of the children. So these guidelines basically provide very, very simple tips to the parents as well as any sort of a guardian, so that it could facilitate the home-based learning. Okay, and it is basically as per the national education policy, which was imposed by the government of India in 2002. So here the age appropriate art activities. So it is, I told you that the art related activities will be promoted, and it is categorized based on this system, that is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, that is the 5 years, the children, or to the gap of this 5-year children. So that is at the foundation stage. At the foundation stage, the age 3 to 8, that is the around 5 years. You can consider, understand, the 3 to 4 1, okay, 4 to 5 the second year, 5 to 6 the third year, the 6 to 7 the fourth year, and 7 to 8 the fifth year. So you will have the 5 years, the gap. So it is categorized as a foundation stage to the age group of the children which are in the age of 3 to 8. The preparatory stage, that is 8 to 11, that is again 3 years, okay, that is 5 years. And the middle stage, that is 11 to 14, that is again 3 years, that is 11 to 12, 12 to 13, and 13 to 14. The second stage, that is from adolescence to the adult stage, that is around 14 to 18, again 4 years, that is 14 to 15, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, and 17 to 18. So that is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system. That is the foundation stage, preparatory stage, middle stage, and second stage for that purpose. And the guidelines basically, have appreciated the role of art as a therapy for the children who have basically undergoing any sort of a stress or the trauma with that respect. So here the separate chapter have been included in the guidelines for supporting the parents, right, which are not literate or which is having very low literacy rate in that respect, so that they could create a positive environment for the support of the children, so that they could learn at the homes. So here the schools, teachers, volunteers may take part as a suggestive steps, so that they could provide some sort of a support to these low literacy parents, because these parents are basically sometimes are not able to provide the supportive environment to the children, so that they could utilize the home as a best learning place to their career. So here the guidelines for the parents participation in the home based learning during the school closure and the beyond is basically given by the Ministry of Education. Okay, next you have the Maritime State Development Council. So here the Union Minister of State independent charge, that is IC means independent charge, okay, for the port, shipping and the waterways, Sri Mansukh Mandavia, have recently chaired the 18th meeting of Maritime State Development Council. Okay, the 18th meeting of Maritime State Development Council was held today through the video conferences or through the virtual mode, right, which was organized by the Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways. Okay, so here the most important aspect is that, right, the MSDC or the Maritime State Development Council is basically an apex advisory body, right, with the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways for the development of maritime sector, and it will also have the aims of ensuring the integrated development of major and the minor ports. So here the most important objective of the MSDC is to develop the national plan, right, to develop a national plan, okay, for the development of the maritime sector, okay, the maritime sector, which is beneficial for both states as well as to center, right, and it will also adopt the best practices to the maritime sector in that respect. So the MSDC, which was constituted in 1997, right, it basically to assess the consultation with various state governments. So you can say that it's a right example of the cooperative federalism, where some sort of a developmental aspects related to the minor and the major project will be taken by this MSDC, right, with the help of the captive users as well as the private participation. So it's a apex advisory body, right, for the development of the maritime sectors, for the integrated development of the major project and the minor ports, right. And here the most important aspect is that it will basically have the assessment of this development of these maritime sectors with the consultation with the state government, right, with that respect. Okay, next you have the Vandana Agarwal Committee, right. So here the International Finance Services Centers Authority have constituted a committee which is chaired by Miss Vandana Agarwal, which was the former senior economic advisor, Government of India, right, to examine the global best practices in the ship financing and the leasing and identity opportunities, right, specifically so that it could enable the activities from the GIFT, or the GIFT city, that is also known as the Gujarat International Finance Tech City, which is located currently in basically in the Gujarat or in the Ahmedabad district of Gujarat. So it's very important that International Finance Service Center Authority have constituted a committee to look after and to examine the global best practices in the financing, in the leasing, and identify the opportunities for that respect, so that it could make a roadmap for that purpose. Okay, here most important aspect is that gift city. So Gujarat International Finance Tech City is basically a business district which is located nearby Ahmedabad in Gujarat. It is India's first operational greenfield smart city, and it is also the International Finance Service Center also for that purpose. Okay, now what we are talking about, this International Finance Service Centers Authority, what is that? See, it has been newly set up, or it has been newly established by the government of India. It was established on the April 27, 2020. That means in the last year itself, this International Finance Service Centers Authority was set up by the government of India by passing a act, that is International Finance Service Centers Authority Act 2019 by the Parliament of India, and it has been currently been headquartered at a gift city in the Gandhinagar in the Gujarat. What is the purpose? So it's basically the International Finance Service Authority is basically it's a unified authority for the development and the regulation of the financial products, the financial services, as well as the financial institutions in the International Finance Service Center in India. So definitely it's having the dynamic nature of the business, which require certain degree of inter-regulatory coordination with the financial sector. So this IFSCA is basically established as a unified regulator, right? As a unified regulator, right, with a holistic vision of promotion of the ease of doing business with the IFSC or International Finance Service Centers, so that it could develop the small or the strong global connect, as well as the focusing on the need of Indian economy, so that it could also serve the needs of the international financial platform with that respect, and it could also boost the national as well as the international economy with that respect. So here the committee basically includes also the representative from the government of India, the Gujarat Maritime Board, and the industry experts for that domain knowledge. And it's most important is that, right, this International Finance Service Service Centers Authority basically aims to provide some sort of regulatory frameworks and facilitate the environment so that the GIFT IFSC Center can become the international hub for the shipping, financing, and the leasing activities. For that purpose, the Vandana Aggarwal was being appointed as the chairperson of this committee. So she is basically Miss Vandana Aggarwal. Next, you have the project Seaboard. See here, the most important aspect is that, right? Here, the most important aspect is that the INS Kadamba. The INS Kadamba is basically the Indian Navy base, which is located in Karnataka. So it is first of all the Navy base. Okay, it is being located in Karwar, right? A Karwar is a place in Karnataka. Right? It is currently the third largest Indian Navy base. It is currently the third largest Indian naval base, and it is being located in the Karwar in the Karnataka. Right? Now, the construction or the expansion of this INS Kadamba was begin in 2000 and basically, in around early 2000. And the first phase was completed in 2005, right? And this base was basically commissioned in 31st of May 2005. Okay, the development of this INS Kadamba, the phase 2 was commenced in 2011, and now it is slated for the completion, right, in the near future, so that it could become the Asia's largest naval base, right? It will become one of the important naval base, right, which will also strengthen the Indian Navy's operational capacity and operational readiness of the armed forces, specifically with the Indian Navy, right? So once this INS Kadamba complete its phase second, it will become the Asia's largest naval base. So here the largest naval infrastructure project, right, for India, which was commenced, right, under the project Seaward. So it will involve the creation of the naval base at the Karwar, or which is basically located on the west coast of India. Okay, so upon completion, this $3 billion program would basically would provide the Indian Navy's the largest naval base, right, specifically on the west coast, so that it could also the largest base to the east of the Suez Canal, specifically in the Asia region. So this new and expanded naval complex will have most advanced features. So it will have the support to the several major warships, submarines. It will also have the yard crafts. It will have the specialized dockyard repairs. It will have the maintenance facilities, right? It will also have the new technologically advanced security, and the communication systems. It will also have the naval air station, right? Like for the runways, for hangars, for housing, for ordnance, handling activities, right? It will also utilize various systems so that some sort of a housing and residential complexes at the multiple location can be built over there. So this would be the largest base in the Asia, specifically belongs to the Indian Navy for that purpose. Okay, the first phase for the construction was begun under the code names called C1. It was completed in 2005, and the second phase was basically commissioned on basically commenced on 2011, and the first phase was basically commissioned on 31st May 2005. Okay, and the IAS Kadamba is currently the third largest Indian naval base, and it is expected to become the largest naval base in the Eastern Hemisphere once it is completed. Okay, so here you could see the Rajnath Singh or Defense Minister who have visited the naval base recently. Okay, next, the Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center. So here the Gujarat Maritime University have signed a memorandum of understanding with the International Finance Service Centers Authority that we have recently just now discussed. Okay, in the gift city, right, for the promotion of the Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center. So let me give you a brief background about that one. So what is happening is that, right, this Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center that we are talking, for the purpose of promotion of this center, it's the first of its kind, right, in the country, right, that will manage the arbitration and the mediation proceedings, okay, with the disputes related to the maritime and the shipping sector in our country. So definitely the Gujarat Maritime University have signed this memorandum of understanding with the International Finance Service Centers Authority, just we have discussed for that, on June 21st, right, to promote this Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center. Okay, right, and it will basically manage the arbitration and the mediation proceedings, right, which is dispute related to the maritime and the shipping sectors in our country. So here the most important aspect is that it will be the first of its kind, this center, okay, that will be deals with some sort of a disputes or the proceedings related to the maritime and the shipping sector. So it will be a part of the maritime cluster, okay, which is basically the Gujarat Maritime Board is basically setting up of in the gift city in the Gandhinagar. So here what is happening is that, though in India you have around 35 arbitration centers, right, for the purpose of arbitration and mediation purpose, but none of these arbitration centers basically deals with exclusively with that maritime sector. So this sector, or this the Gujarat this Gujarat International Maritime Arbitration Center will basically exclusively deals with the maritime sector or the arbitration and the mediation of this maritime sector. So it will involve the Indian players, right? For example, now you have to go for this mediation and the arbitration at the Singapore Arbitration Center, right? To make the India's this center as a world-class arbitration center, which is mainly focusing on the maritime and the shipping dispute, right? This sector was basically promoted, and for that purpose, land have been leased, right, within the gift city. Right? Around 10,000 hectares of the land is basically leased within the gift city for the purpose of promotion of this, the arbitration center. So this center is expected to be ready by the end of August 2021. Right? It is being needed for the purpose of exclusively dealing with the maritime sector in our country. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you.